How loud should you master for Spotify? Now, I respect your time, so the short answer is this. You want to keep about 8 loudness units of dynamic range, but a better number might be 10. Spotify recommends that you have -14 LUFS for your volume, but a better number might be -10. You want to also have -2 decibels of true peak, and you should probably check your limiter at unity gain. Now, this is a rough generalization made for electronic music, hip hop, and pop. The exact numbers are going to depend on your specific song and your genre. But what do those numbers mean? Why did I choose them? And how can you do it too? That's what I'm going to show you today. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you a hack that can actually make your song louder than other songs on Spotify, even with volume matching. Now, side note, mastering is much too big of a topic to fit into one YouTube video. So if you want more in-depth training, make sure to check out bassclef.com. But I'll still try my best to give you something good today. Hey, this is Bassclef, and I teach music producers how to finish songs fast and get that pro sound. Now let's explain this stuff. It all starts with war. You see, a long time ago we had this loudness war thing going on. It was really more to do with CDs and stuff. So when people were mastering for them, they were trying to compete on who would be the loudest, because we're all kind of fooled by when we hear a louder song, we tend to think it's better, especially if you don't know much about music production. Now, there's no loudness matching on CDs. Whatever you put on there is what you put on there. So people were trying to make things as physically loud as possible. Fast forward to now, and we have Spotify and all these streaming platforms that do volume matching. Now, Spotify, most of them will play back your music at -14 decibels LUFS, and if your music is louder than that, it will turn it down, and if your music is quieter than that, it will turn it up until it's at -14. So you might think, why don't I just set it at -14? Well, there's some benefits to being slightly louder, and there's some downsides to being slightly quieter. I mean, it all depends on your song, really, but a lot of modern stuff benefits from compression and limiting, from the glue it gives it, from the way it can give it energy and excitement. So things like, dance music, hip hop, pop and rock work really well with, we've come to get used to this as a normal part of it now, really. And if you hear them without enough of that compression and stuff, they just kind of sound a little weak and transient and maybe a bit empty. Having said that, if you're doing stuff like classical or jazz or something, you might really want that extra dynamic range and you might want to go less. So how do you choose the right kind of volume and amount of limiting and squash for your song? Well, you gotta listen. But for most people doing electronic stuff, hip hop and pop, somewhere around 10 loudness units is pretty good. Now, you might go as squashed as, say, 8 loudness units, or maybe as open as 14 loudness units. Somewhere in between there, you're gonna be sitting pretty good. Now, let's jump into the DAW and I'll show you some examples. Okay, so we're here in the DAW and I want to give you some audio examples of what I've been talking about. We're going to use a couple of tools. This thing is an excellent free meter plugin that I recommend you guys use. You can grab it off the Ulin website, or I'll put a link down below. And I'm going to use, this is my favorite limiter I use, this is the DMG Limitless. You can use whatever limiter you want. First off, I'm going to play the track with no limiting, and let's hear how it sounds and see how loud it is over on the meter. So about -17.5 LUFS for the volume. So that's below, what Spotify recommends. Take note that our average dynamic range is 12.4 right now. Don't worry about true peak for now. We're going to talk about that later. Okay, so let's bring it up to what Spotify recommends. This should bring it up to -14. So around about there. So that's what they're talking about. So it's a little bit louder already. You can feel a little bit more of that glue I was talking about. But let's go a little further. Now we're hitting about -9.6. And you'll notice our average dynamic range is getting closer to what I was talking about, which is about 10 loudness units. We're going to need a bit more glue as well, but it's easy to start thinking, hey, maybe this is just better because it's louder, right? So what happens if we went even further? This is where people might make a mistake by going too far. I'm going to go to this one. So now we're getting -6 LUFS, our dynamic range. Look at that. Look at it getting really squashed in there. It's only at about 6.4 loudness units, but it was so much louder, and it's really easy to get caught up thinking, hey, that must be better, right? So this is how you can check. What you want to do is make sure you're running your limiter at unity gain so that we're only hearing the limiting and we're not hearing it getting louder each time. There's an easy way to do that on this plugin. You just hit this link control, and it's going to pull this output volume down to the same, like this. I'm going to go and do that to all of those presets I just made there. The same volume that we put in is the same volume we're going to get out. It's unity gain. So that way, the only difference we hear is the limiting itself. So starting from no limiting at all. Now let's go to the -14 setting. Go to the one with 10 loudness units of dynamic range. Let's go to the one that's really squashed. Yeah, that one doesn't punch anymore, right? You notice that difference? Like it's really squeezed. Let me go between that one, the really squeezed one, and my recommended one where it's halfway sort of between, where we're getting a little bit of limiting and compression, a little bit of glue, but not, all this bad distortion. So let's try that out. So I'll start with the full-on one. So much more punch, right? It like really comes through, and like it's just not worth pushing it that extra bit further. We start getting all those bad artifacts. So that's what I mean when I talk about being too squashed. Like there is a limit for everyone's song. Different songs will be able to go further. A lot of it depends on how good your mix down is. The better your mix down, the more you can squeeze your song with it still sounding good. But in general, I rarely hear songs sounding good when they have less than 8 loudness units of dynamic range. So that would be a warning too. If you're going past 8 loudness units, if you're going, less, like into 7 or 6, you might be going too far. This one, I think 10 is generally pretty good on dance music, hip hop, and pop. So you'll notice I didn't really care too much about what the LUFS was doing on my favorite setting here. I was hitting around about 10 loudness units, but my LUFS was close to 10 as well, -10, which I'm probably going to get turned down by Spotify by about 4 dB. But I like the glue that I'm getting by a little bit of squeezing on my dynamic range, a little bit of having that limiter kick in. So this is what I'm talking about, where there's a sweet spot. So you shouldn't just aim for -14 LUFS just because Spotify, that's what they're balancing their music at. There's more to it than that. There's a sound, there's a style. Compression is a part of these genres these days. It's something people are used to. A little bit of it can sound nice, can sound exciting. So don't worry so much about making sure that you're at exactly -14 LUFS. Worry much more about hitting that like button and sharing this with more people that could benefit from it. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about this -2 dB true peak thing. Okay, this comes about because when Spotify takes your WAV file that you send them, they convert it to a compressed format like MP3 or OGG Vorbis or something. But when they do that transcoding process, it can have little peaks and errors, and it's going to have little spikes added to your song. So we leave this extra 2 dB as headroom to catch out for those. Now, if you did your song at -14 LUFS exactly, then you can probably leave only -1 dB of true peak, and you'll probably be okay. But if you're going to push it a little louder, like some of the examples I'm showing you in this video, then you should really leave at least -2. Now make sure you use true peak for this and not regular peak, because true peak can detect those intersample peaks that will show up in the transcoding process that we might not notice when we're just working on it on the computer. And don't worry that you're turning your song down. Spotify's just going to turn it back up for you anyway. So you're not losing any volume, you're gaining clarity. It's easy. Like you either do the right thing or you end up with a distorted track. It's almost as easy as hitting the like button down there. Then you can help me help more people. Okay, so now let me show you how we can set up this -2 dB true peak. This is now where we're going to look at that section of the Ulin loudness meter. You can see currently, we hadn't been looking at it, and we're at 0.2. We're way over. All you got to do, this is the easiest thing. You just lower your output volume. On my limiter, it's called ceiling. It's either going to be output ceiling, something like that. So we'll just lower this down. If we're on 0.2, we've probably got to come down -2.2. Let's try this. There you go. So I'm under the allowable amount, giving them headroom for that transcoding. You'll notice it's brought down the volume of my LUFS. I'm getting actually a little closer to what they asked for. I'm at -12 right now. But you'll also notice that my loudness units, my dynamic range hasn't changed, because dynamic range, whether you turn the volume of the output up or down, the dynamic range is always the same. That's why it matters the most. All right, so let's talk about this hack. So here's the thing. Spotify says your song needs to be -14 dB LUFS, right? Integrated, yeah? But what it's actually doing, it's not focusing on your drop like we are when we're making these settings. We're doing everything on the loudest part of the song. Spotify looks at your whole song in like an offline process. So then it takes into account how many breakdowns you have or how dynamic your song is as a whole. So if you had a song that was beats all the way through with bass all the way through, it's gonna just block it at minus 14. But if you had a song that was a lot quieter for a long time and then it became loud at the end, it's gonna take the average of that of minus 14. So what happens is that loud bit at the end actually ends up being louder than minus 14. You know, I ran some tests on this by piping Spotify into Ableton and measuring it with the U-lean meter, and you can see that a lot of the modern tracks are all coming through, yeah, minus 14, even their like real-time LUFS is minus 14. But when you come to some older tracks, like a standout one was Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, which has got a really long intro section which starts super quiet and then starts getting louder and louder till the final loudest part of the song at the end. By the time it hit the end there, it was like, I think it was about minus 10. So we're getting like 4 dB louder. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? Let's jump into the DAW and I'll show you some examples. All right, so here's what I mean. If I took this loop we've been using to demo this and we turned it into sort of a song, and we rendered this out. So I'm going to call this one all groove because there's no breakdowns, it's just drums and bass all the way through, right? And then we're going to do another one, and in that one we're going to have lots more breakdowns in there, and we're going to compare the average volume of the whole thing. Okay, so on this one, let's give it, I'm going to take out all of this stuff all the way through here. Maybe, you know what, let's make it a little bit more realistic. Let's imagine there's 2 drops like that. Okay, let's render this out. All right, done. So there's 2 ways we can check this with what we've got in front of us. One is to use the offline measurement on the U-lean loudness meter. You simply drag the files on there. So let's start with that. Let's drag on the one that's all groove, and it's going to analyze it. I think you might need the paid version of the U-lean plugin for this, but if you don't have the paid version, I'm going to show you another way to do it as well. So it's told me that, so you can see the dynamic range still the same, true peak still the same. Oh, it's going to be pretty much what we're measuring because it's going to be the same as that one loop that went all the way through. But remember these numbers because we're going to test the other one. So this one with drums all the way through got an integrated LUFS of minus 11.9, and you can see the dynamic range there and the true peak at minus 2. Now let's drag in the one with the breakdowns in it. Now this one's come through at minus 17.5, even though the peak loudness of it at that moment in the drop, it's just as loud as the other one, right? But it thinks it's, what, 5 dB quieter. So you know what's gonna happen? Spotify's gonna play it 5 dB louder. Now let's test it on something else just to make sure. So here's the other way. If you don't have the U-lean Loudness Meter Pro version that does this offline measuring, you can use, I'll pull it up, this website, loudnesspenaltyanalyzer.com. So let's drag a file onto here. We'll start with the all groove one. While that's going, I'll open another one, and I'll drag the one with the breakdowns to be analyzed on this side. All right, let's check our results. So we can see the one that was all groove was going to get turned down by Spotify by minus 2.1. That's what we're expecting because it was about minus 12 LUFS after all our adjustments. Now let's see the one that has more breakdowns in it. It's going to get turned up plus 1.2. So the drop is going to sound 3 decibels louder in this song that has more breakdowns. Now you got to keep in mind that this is not an actual Spotify website, it's a guess. But I've done this same test by playing back different songs on Spotify, things that are modern and have grooves all the way through, dance stuff, versus things that were recorded years ago with much more dynamic range like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, which comes through with way more power and way more volume in that final drop of the song. So it's a little hack to keep in mind. You can test it yourself on Spotify, make some measurements, but in general, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a more dynamic song, if you have quieter breakdowns or more of them, the louder parts of your song are gonna come through louder on Spotify. Currently anyway, unless they change this sometime in the future, but this is what is happening right now in 2021. Now, does that mean you should put loads of breakdowns in your song all the time? No, I mean, it's still got to be a good song. I mean, this principle is always applied that a song with good dynamics in it is going to feel more powerful when it kicks in. Of course, because it's all about comparison, it's about contrast. If it was quieter before and then it came in louder, it's going to seem more impressive. So it's kind of nice that this old principle still rings true today. So it's dynamics that makes the difference. And you know what else helps? Smashing that like button. If you haven't done it yet and you found this helpful, you know what to do. Alright guys, there you have it. There's my tips on the right mastering volume for Spotify. But remember, there's a lot more that goes into mastering than just this. And really, the thing that makes a great master is actually a great mixdown. So if you're looking to take this a step further, make sure to check out my website, bassclef.com, for loads more tips and tutorials. And you know what? I'm curious. Let me know if you ever master your songs louder than the recommended Spotify things for other purposes, like say for Beatport or for submitting demos to label A&Rs. If you ever do that, hit me with a comment below and maybe I can show you some tips about how you can make your tracks super loud, like unnecessarily loud for Spotify, but for those other situations where you might want it to be competitively loud. So if you guys convince me to do that, I'll make a video and I'll put it up here. Alright, that's it from me. If you found this video helpful, remember to smash that like button so more producers can get this same info as well too. And if you want to see more of my videos, hit the subscribe button or just check out the ones on screen now.